Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Court Storm College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Storm Media Network. My name is Kanaye, and I'm here with my co-host Josh. And today on this episode, we're going to be breaking down this week's AP poll, some of the recent matchups that happened. We'll give you guys a recap and some of our takeaways from some of the bigger games that have been played. A couple upsets last night on Tuesday, January 6th, that we're going to be talking about, as well as some teams that have kind of disappointed, as well as excited us from where they stood in the original week one AP poll to where they stand right now. But before we get into all of that today, please engage with the content you see on this channel in any way you can, whether it's liking, subscribing, or just telling other people about the Court Storm. Everything goes a long way with influencing YouTube's algorithm and getting more people to watch our videos. Also, be sure to turn on post notifications so you are the first to see our newest videos. So let's get right into it and start with the week 9 AP poll. Obviously, not too much movement at the top. Most of the teams who have been good have continued to be good. I will say, though, probably one of the biggest risers has to be Nebraska after getting that win against Michigan State.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a fun argument to have because everyone's having the talk of Arizona versus Michigan. Arizona is up on this poll by 3 first-place votes and a single total vote, which is insane. It is really 1A and 1B, and it's definitely a question to say. Personally, I lean towards Arizona right now, but I could totally hand it over to Michigan if anything really changes, in my opinion. But outside of, the top, 5 teams, nothing really changed. Nebraska rose a lot. Illinois rose in general, which I'm not really so sure about, but the metrics have always been high on them, so I can't really blame. And then Louisville, Kansas, they dropped big games this year or earlier last week. And then Georgia and Iowa gained a lot, but both lost on Tuesday, so they're probably going to get a lot of reversals.
Right. And I mean, I think the most action you're going to see is towards the bottom of the poll. Georgia got up to 18th this week. Iowa got up to 19th. Of course, both those teams just lost to unranked squads, Iowa losing to Minnesota and Georgia losing to Florida. Additionally, Louisville has dropped 4 spots, and they're probably going to drop even more now that they've lost to Duke on last night, Tuesday, January 6th. Tennessee has dropped. Kansas has dropped as well, even though they picked up a really, what I think could be a turnaround win for their season at TCU, where it went to OT, and Darren Peterson was just stellar in that game and continuing to prove why he is possibly worth taking with the number 1 pick in the NBA draft this year. Virginia dropped slightly, but I think this week what was really cool to see was SMU and UCF get ranked. Of course, UCF's probably going to fall now that they've dropped that trap game at Oklahoma State, but nonetheless, SMU big win against North Carolina this past weekend. And I got to say, overall, I think the committee has continued to do a really good job with the polls they put out.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good year for the AP poll. I will also turn your attention towards the others receiving votes. Villanova was out by 5 votes between UCF and them. I think Villanova should have won that one, and now looking back on it, they definitely deserved it. Seton Hall was still getting a lot of votes, which is really nice to see for a team like them that had that great win against Creighton at home that really boosts their resume as of right now. Southern Cal, Utah State, Miami, Ohio, which is currently 16-0, which is just crazy. And then other good mid-majors like St. Louis and St. Mary's are also in that mix. So a lot of teams that can really be flowing in and out between 20 and 25 spot this year. So I'm not going to say don't pay attention to these teams, but there's going to be a lot of change at the bottom, but not a lot of change at the top right now. We haven't really seen any of the top 5 to 10 teams show any real weaknesses, which is very interesting. And as of our last recording, no teams have lost a game that were undefeated right now, which is kind of funny. I thought by this point we'd have one of those squads lose, but Miami kept it going. Nebraska won at Ohio State, another great proving win for them. And Michigan State had a crazy finale to beat the lowly Penn State to keep their undefeated streak going.
Right. And now I kind of want to turn everyone's attention towards some of the recaps we want to do for some of the games that have been played over the last couple of days. Josh, I'll ask you first. Is there a particular matchup you wanted to talk about to start off with?
I mentioned it literally a second ago, Michigan, Penn State. This is not a game that Michigan should have been close in. Penn State was without their top freshman, Caden Mingo, their best player. Penn State is very typically and very much this year a last place team in the Big Ten. There were probably more Michigan fans in Happy Valley than there were Penn State fans. It was a almost empty stadium. It really could have just been like just some random neutral site for all we knew. But Penn State kept it close. They never really seemed to go away. even when they were down double digits late in the game. And Michigan just didn't look like themselves. Obviously, there was problems with the Axel Lendenberg, which is not the best sign to see. But then you also have Ellie Cadeau not really having consistency in his game. Ane Mara was missing a few shots that he probably should have made. And Penn State was making a lot more than they probably needed to. Other than Frankie Dillon, this team is not good by any means necessary. This is probably a quad 3 win at most for Michigan, and this would have been a horrible loss to pick up. So luckily they don't lose in that 3-point buzzer shot. But there are chips in the armor for Michigan that are popping up again. And maybe this is just them adapting to playing true on the road games. We've already seen them struggle on the road against TCU and Wake. So I'm not so sure to think about them right now on this, but they have a lot more, like a lot stronger road games to play in the Big Ten. So I'm really curious about how they shake up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the way I looked at it was it seemed like Michigan was kind of just playing with their food when it came to that game last night against Penn State in Happy Valley. I think it's tough to go from Chrysler Center where you're packing the place and you're winning by 30, 40 plus, and the place is rowdy, the energy's up. It's tough to go from that and then go on a road to what was, like you mentioned, a pretty dead home environment for Penn State. Of course, that program is probably never going to have a lot of fan attendance as opposed to what their football program gets. But without Caden Mingo, they really had no business being in the game, and I got to say they kept it close. I think for me, seeing Michigan find a way to win that game, despite their best player Yaxel not playing all too well, Ellie Cadeau wasn't good, Merez and Ademara were not really a factor whatsoever either. To have other guys step up like LJ Case in that first half and Trey McKinney come on late in the second, I think it was really important to see that they can win some of these tougher games, I guess, on the road where your better players aren't playing as well. But at the same time, if they play a better team, even a middle of the pack team in the Big Ten, they lose last night with the way they performed. And it makes me question, is the depth that they have enough to win games where their stars aren't playing well? Like, I don't know if you can consistently rely on LJ Kaysen and Trey McKinney, who's a freshman, to lead you to a win when your stars aren't playing like stars. So that is one thing that kind of worries me about Michigan. Additionally, the shooting seems like it kind of has come down to earth slightly between their game against USC at home last week, along with how they shot the ball against Penn State. So I'm not worried about Michigan. I really just think I chalk it up as something that it's tough to keep your spirits high and keep the energy high when you're going on the road and playing in a dead atmosphere. But nonetheless, I think Michigan's still wagging, and they'll probably be back on track once they play some tougher opponents.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. There are concerns about where Michigan can be, and they have obviously the best ceiling of any team right now, but their floor of all the top 5 teams is probably the lowest by far. Like this
Right.
team could bottom out, and they might be peaking at the wrong time, which still a lot to say on that. But they have to win these games on the road in more comfortable fashion for everyone to feel more comfortable at them being that national title contender that everyone sees them as. I think let's transition over to another original national title contender team in Florida, Georgia. Georgia had obviously a ranking coming into this game. They played pretty well against Auburn in their last game. They go and they kind of get smoked by Florida. Is this a turnaround game for them?
I think it could be. Of course, Georgia fans are probably going to point to Cyril getting ejected. I'm sure that definitely plays a role, but I think Florida probably wins this game regardless. I think the performance you got out of Thomas Houck was really stellar, and he's continuing to prove why he might be worth taking with a first round pick if you're an NBA GM going into the summer draft. Nonetheless, I think if Florida's guards play well, that they're a really good team. They've been inconsistent. The bigs are, for the most part, they've been good this year. Houck has been stellar. Condon is, for the most part, been good with a few bad games, and Chinny Liu, he does his job protecting the rim and rebounding. For me, I think they've played well in their big games. They just haven't been able to win, and I think if they can get any semblance of consistency between that guard pairing of Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee, then they're going to be a really good team. But I'm still in the boat where I definitely think Final Four is off the table. I think they cap off their ceiling as being a second weekend team.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that. There are opportunities for growth with honestly both teams if you're gonna ask me. But Florida they need to be the title contender from the SEC if they want to play the game that they've always kind of played. And it's a lot for Todd Golden to ask of. Like this team is definitely needing its guards. It really needs Boogie Flans,
Yeah.
really needs Xavier
And
to grow.
and you really didn't get much out of those two last night. I mean, for the record, I think they won solely because of the play of their bigs. I mean, Thomas Houck at 21. Chinny was 10 points, which is probably more than you get out of him most of the time. Condon was good in this game as well. You had, 50 points from that trio alone. The guards need to step it up and keep pace with what the big men are producing. But obviously, I think it's early. It's harder for transfer guards to come in their first year with the new program and be great right away. But the clock's ticking. We're about to be midway through January, and if they haven't figured it out yet, then I don't know that they will.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Let's go to Texas Tech Houston. This is just a great game, and I'm glad Kanaye kind of called this off call on how Texas Tech really could have won this game. They honestly looked like they were going to until Kingston Flemings stepped into overdrive. He hit a crazy, just a dagger three when it mattered most. He's playing at the best level he could be right now. Do you think Houston has an opportunity to be a one seed, possible national title contender after a game like this?
I think they do for a lot of the reasons we've both talked about on this podcast before. The freshmen on Houston elevate the ceiling of this team. And I think Houston's in a unique position where in past years, they're usually kind of just are what they are as the season goes on. But this year, I think they're a team that's going to grow as the season gets on. They're going to goes on, I should say, and they're going to get better. And they don't play the better teams in the Big 12 towards the end of Big 12 conference play. So I think by that point in the year, they're going to be a really, really good team. And there's a world where they only drop 2 to 3 games in the conference this year. And they could potentially contend to be a one seed going into the NCAA tournament. I think overall, this game was a real just clear telltale sign of how I view both of these programs. Houston, the freshman, I think is what really pushes Houston over the top in a lot of their matchups that they play in. I mean, Kingston Flem, as you mentioned, he was outstanding. Chris Sinak had a double-double. Emmanuel Sharp has gotten things going, but, Miles Uzan wasn't the greatest. He's been a little inconsistent, and I think that's a big thing with Houston where if your returners aren't playing well, you have these freshmen that could step up and have big moments. And then if your returners eventually get back to how they were playing last year when they made it to the national championship game against Florida, then Houston's in a really good spot with Kelvin Sampson to hopefully make it, if you're a Cougars fan, hopefully make it back to the big dance. But I think with Texas Tech, it's, again, really just what do you have outside of Christian Anderson and JT Toppin? And if one of those guys doesn't play well, the way Christian Anderson kind of struggled last night, do you really have all too much to turn to? And they're not a very deep team. They really only go like 6 to 7 players deep. Donovan Atwell was decent in that game. I think what was really stuck out to me was the performance of Jalen Petty. I think Josh had mentioned me off recording. He made 5 threes in that game that his total was. So they need someone to step up and be aggressive and really become a third scoring option for this team. It's going to take so much pressure off of Christian Anderson. It's going to take so much pressure out of JT Top, and he's going to get a lot more opportunities to score down low when you have another perimeter threat that players on opposing teams have to come out and defend. So I think Atwell needs to look to be more aggressive going forward. Do you want to look for Lawan Watts to do the same? And yeah, maybe Jalen Petty proves himself to be that third option that they've been looking for the entire year now.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I do think Texas Tech is also on the way up based on a game like this. They really could have won that game. And I think that says a lot about how they can be not just on the road, but against top teams. We've already seen with Duke, they can play the tough game and play from behind and win those games. They were up most of this game, so I'm not so sure if there's a one-to-one translation with Duke, but it's a good sign for both teams in a weird way. And I do hope that these teams play a very similar game when Houston has to go to Texas Tech to play. That's what I'm very excited for. I'll throw it to one more game. I know we mentioned Sully earlier, but Kansas and TCU. TCU blew I think, 16-point lead and a near double-digit lead within the last minute of the game. David Peterson has probably the best game of his career so far and pounds TCU off of Fog Allen. Just complete transversal, like complete flip arounds, possibly, for this team.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, this could be a statement win that really turns the trajectory of Kansas' season in the right direction going forward. We've talked about in the past how Kansas has kind of struggled with the transfers and players they've had the last few years that they just kind of they don't play with pride in wearing the Kansas jersey. And this year they have that. They have guys that really, they take pride in wearing that Kansas jersey and they play for the name on the front rather than the back. They have tough players. Granted, they're not maybe as talented as other players on past teams, but they still play the right way. You have a star in David Peterson, who, again, could very well go number 1 in the NBA draft. And he obviously elevates their ceiling a ton. And Cole Rosario's been really good. Melvin Council's been good. Trey White has had moments this year. And I think they just play tough. They obviously don't play, they don't quit. I mean, the last night was a perfect example where they were down 16 points, I believe, and they're able to make it so that they can force OT and ultimately get out with that win at TCU. So I think it was a huge win. And of course, TCU is not the greatest opponent, but hey, they played Michigan tough earlier in the year. Kansas can have some big tests coming up in Big 12 play. So if Darren Peterson can continue to stay healthy and stay on the court and contribute to winning the way he has when he does play, then Kansas, I think, has a chance to be an Elite Eight team. I don't think Final Four is really their ceiling in my eyes. Josh might view it a little bit differently there, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, I think Kansas definitely has a chance if all everything aligns, then they could definitely make the second weekend.
No, I definitely agree that there is definitely a lot to say about where this team can go. And before we transition over, kind of forgot to mention Duke Louisville. I just want to go over it very slightly here because Cal Brown was out this game with just what appears to be just odd injury. He just keeps seeming to not be able to play, which is very concerning for a team that now likely could be unranked at the end of the week. They already lost to Stanford, which is not a good sign. And losing a game like this where they were up pretty decent at half and just fell apart at the end is just bad to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a game that Louisville really needed to win. Nonetheless, they looked like they were going to for much of the first half, really the entirety of the first half. I think what really changed things was Duke transitioning over from playing zone defense. Shire made the adjustment and they decided to go to man. I think his game plan going in really was built around the idea, okay, Mikal Brown is not going to be playing this game. They're not going to have a true facilitator on the floor. And in that way, we're going to be able to play zone and not have to worry about guys, being able to penetrate in throughout the gaps in the zone and being able to hit shots. But Conwell lit up the zone very quickly. And it was clear that they had to turn to man defense, which I think is Duke's strong suit over playing zone. And I got to say, Dami Sarr, the defense he played on Ryan Conwell was really impressive to me. He really neutralized Ryan Conwell in that second half. And I think Duke offensively, Cam Boozer was unstoppable as he normally has been this year. And I think what you got of Isaiah Evans, who's now had his third straight 20-point game, if I'm not mistaken, along with Caleb Foster, who was really impressive. And I've talked about in the past where I think Caleb Foster is so important for this year's Duke team, where he needs to be aggressive. He needs a guy that can be able to create off the dribble and hit tough shots. And if he can do that more consistently the way he did against Louisville last night, then Duke's in a really good spot, because that was kind of the one calling card I had regarding Duke's weakness, where I just felt like they don't have a consistent tough shot maker, consistent closer. You don't really want a big man, especially a freshman, doing that in Cam Boozer, the way they kind of were earlier in the year. If you have Caleb Foster do what he did last night going forward, then Duke's definitely in a really good spot to get back to a Final Four.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. We're actually going to transition over to games for this upcoming week, or games that are currently happening right now, I should say. Today is Wednesday the 7th, and we have probably the biggest game of the SEC. I know a lot of people have circled it down, but I just want to bring it up. It is Alabama at Vanderbilt. This is probably one of the most important games for both teams, and this is probably the proving game for Vanderbilt, who obviously is one of the leftover 5 undefeated teams, but they're kind of like the Nebraska of the SEC. They just haven't had that Michigan State game yet. That's kind of where I'm comparing this to. What do you feel about this one going into Nashville?
This is really an interesting game. This is Vanderbilt's real test to see if them and Mark Byington are legit and they are a true contender across the country. So I'm really excited for this game. I want to say I actually do lean towards the Vandy side here. It is a home game for them, and I do understand Alabama's offense is super high powered. Baron Philon's been great this year. He's played at a first team All American level. At Holloway, excuse me, he played really stellar the other night, had a big score and performance. But I think Vandy wins this game on the defensive end. I know they really haven't played a team that plays to the pace that Bama does under Nate Oates, but nonetheless, I think what Duke Miles brings you on the defensive end of the floor is really going to help in not necessarily stopping that pairing of Aiden Holloway and LeBaron Philon, but maybe getting them off to a slower start for Vandy to hope, I guess, if you're a Commodores fan, take an early lead against them going into the half, which I think is definitely going to help their case. But it's going to be interesting to see, because I don't. Vandy's really going to get a test to see how good they are defensively. I think Duke Miles is up for the task. I'm curious to see if Tyler Tanner, Tyler Nickel, and some of the other guys are as well. But I'm going to roll with Vandy here. Hopefully, World where Bama wins, and I won't be shocked if they do.
Yeah, I'm rolling with Vanderbilt here as well. I really feel like this is just the proving game in more ways than one for this team. I'm not going to say that Aiden Holloway and Co can't do it. Like LeBaron Farland and him are probably one of the best duos, not just in the SEC but in the country. But you look at the triple threat that they have with Devin McLaughlin, Duke Miles, and Tyler Tanner, and it's just effectively better. Like even without home court advantage, it's just effectively better, and the schemes are better. And while they've never played a team as offensively sound as Alabama, they can definitely run them up. I feel like this is definitely a game that's going to be a dogfight at certain points. There's gonna be threes chucked around like pennies in a pond. Like it's gonna be one of those games that could really be 100 versus 101. But I'm very excited to see how this one turns out. And yeah, give me the Commodores to win this one, and that might be a big sign about them possibly winning the SEC this year.
Most definitely. And were there any other games you wanted to talk
Yeah,
about
I actually want
previewing
to
for
talk
that?
about Iowa State at Baylor. It's just throwing it out there. It is on Peacock, so I'm a little bit annoyed about that one. Actually, wait a minute. We're not going to talk about that one. Let's talk about a little mid-major matchup between St. Louis and VCU. No offense to the Baylor's team, but I do feel like Iowa State kind of clowns them on that one. This is one I've been meaning to talk about for a while now. Does St. Louis, probably the best mid-major outside of Gonzaga, win this game and cement themselves as not just a mid-major, but a possible second weekend threat coming into conference play?
Do they do all of that in this game against VCU? I'm not sure if they cement themselves as a second weekend threat, but I definitely think they cement themselves as probably maybe the best team in the A10. I mean, I would say they probably are the best in the A10 right now. I think that just the way that the team has played, there's no true one star. Of course, Robbie Avila is the guy who gets all the notoriety and attention, but other guys like Dion Brown, Trey Green, I think they've been good for St. Louis this year in that Billikens program. I'm picking them to win at VCU. I understand VCU has played pretty solid to start the year, and I think that program has full opportunity to make the NCAA tournament as well.
Definitely.
Potentially as a bid stealer if they don't get in at large.
Yeah, but I,
But
I, no, I think this is personally in the same way that we have Vanderbilt, Alabama. This is a proving game for St. Louis as
yeah,
the prime mid-major. Sorry if I'm pulling out like second weekend here. I really feel like this is the team of destiny for the A10 in a way. Like what Josh Schertz has been building here for the past 2 years, and especially now that Robbie Avila is fully healthy and is playing behind a really nice team, says so much. And honestly, VCU is probably the second, if not third best team. They, in their own right, could win a tournament game if things go well for them, or could get an at large bid if they win this game. And a lot can be said about where St. Louis goes if they do win this game, because this is a quad one win for them. This is probably one of the few quad one games they can pick up
yeah.
in conference. And if they keep this win going, this will this will skyrocket this team because obviously you can't run the table in the A10, but if you can win a game at VCU, who says you can't win a game at George Mason? Who says you can't win a game at Dayton or a game at George Washington? So a lot of things can really snowball from here. I'm only going to say so much because I don't really keep up with A10 ball too much. So if you're in the comments, please let me know if you're a big A10 guy. But this is a very crucial game for how St. Louis could really function itself going into the rest of conference play.
Definitely. And if there's a year to watch the A10, it's this year. They're really good. I think they could definitely get two bids at large. And then who knows if there's a bid stealer that gets thrown in there and they end up getting three and then knocking another Power Five team out of the tournament. That's definitely something to watch out for as the season goes on. I like how you mentioned St. Louis potentially being that mid-major team of destiny. That would make for a really fun story to watch in the NCAA tournament. Hey, I mean, who wouldn't want to see more Robbie Avila content everywhere? So
He
I'm
deserves to make
definitely
the tournament. After
yeah.
Indiana State, he deserves that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy you got to celebrate. People like that remind you that the plot isn't completely lost in college basketball. I understand he did leave Indiana State and transfer to St. Louis, but I mean, he could have gone to a Power Five program, made a lot more money than what he's probably making at St. Louis. He stuck with his head coach that he had it at Indiana State with Josh Schertz, excuse me. But nonetheless, I mean, for him to stick it out with that program, and now he has a true team around him where he kind of didn't have that last year. It's great to see. And yeah, I would love to see the Billikens going a little bit of a run in March Madness this year. But I guess to get into what our segment is regarding some teams that have disappointed and also kind of surprised us in where they stand in the AP poll as opposed to where they stood in the first AP poll that came out to start the college basketball season. I'll ask you first, Josh, to start this one off. Which team did you want to talk about first?
Let's do
I guess let's start with
surprise. Yeah,
disappointing
let's. Oh,
team. Yeah.
disappointments. We talked about it on end for the past half an hour before recording. The Big East as a whole deserves to be in the disappointment category. Outside of literally just UConn, which I guess no one's going to be surprised for that one, but St. John's has been disappointing as hell. Aiden has been horrible. They were ranked for the season 2, if you remember. Teams that could have been bubbly like Xavier and Butler have fallen pretty low. Providence is just barely alive. And a team that we thought we had a lot of comfort in that could have really made noise, Georgetown, is functionally dead right now. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of problems with this conference. A lot of coaches could be fired. A lot of coaches are going to leave. We don't know how much time Rick Pitino has left at St. John's, for example. Like, Ed Cooley is being talked about as leaving as soon as the end of the season. Like, there really are so many concerns with where this conference goes. There are some nice spotlights. We'll probably get to it later on in today's episode, but overall, there's a lot to be concerned about if you're a Big East fan like us.
Yeah, I think there's a legitimate argument that can be made that St. John's has been the most disappointing team in college basketball this year. They started top five. They started fifth
Yeah, they
in week
started
one
fifth.
AP poll.
You got to remember that.
They're currently unranked, and I mean, a lot of that falls on the questions that I had about St. John's going into the year, or just the lack of a true point guard, not having that. Zubic was stellar against Providence, but did turn the ball over a lot. He wasn't great at the line. I think that win for Providence was huge and potentially being able to turn around their season. Stephen Vox was really great in that game. I think he had 4 or 5 threes. I forget off the top of my head, but that could definitely be a win that Providence points back to a couple months from now and says, oh, that's what turned the season around. But nonetheless, they got to handle business in Big East play. A lot of teams that are potentially on the bubble right now in the Big East, so they got to handle business in Big East play. So we'll see what happens with that going forward. I guess the team I will throw out as what I found disappointing is Louisville, I guess. Louisville had a top 3 transfer class this year, and they started the season ranked 11th. They're probably going to be unranked next week. I know a lot of that fell on Mikal Brown Jr. not being healthy for many of their games. But nonetheless, I just think that they've struggled a lot more than I think they would have going into the season. I think that defensively, they're definitely just not there. I thought they'd be a lot better with the size that they have in their backcourt, along with their rotation that they have with the guys, with their bigs that they have in the front court as well. And just, offensively, I think at times they're a little lacking in identity. I think a lot of that could be attributed to Mikal Brown not playing. And, once they get him back, maybe some of those issues will be remedied. But nonetheless, I think Louisville has been slightly disappointing for me. And that was a team that I definitely felt I probably had in my Final Four. I forget off the top of my head going into the season. But yeah, that's a team that probably doesn't have that ceiling anymore.
Yeah, there are so many problems with where Louisville is right now. And for starters, yes, Mikal Brown Jr. probably would have won them a lot more games if he wasn't injured. And I think the Tennessee game and the Duke games are good examples of that. But even then, I'm not so sure they would have won either game. There's so many problems that can be made about the depth issues and the over reliability, I should say, on Ryan Conwell. He can only do so much. He was never supposed to be the main player on this team, and not to put the blame on Mikal Brown Jr. because he is a stellar freshman, regardless of how you look at him with his injury right now. I still really feel like this team is missing something. And I don't know what it is or who it is that needs to step up or change positions or just be a better player for this team to start making more sense. But this was a squad that both me and Kanaye thought could have won and probably was on track to win the ACC starting the year. We thought they would have really contended well with Duke, and we just saw them lose their best game against Duke. They're not going to get that opportunity again, and I really feel like there's a big problem about where this team can be because they have to rely on winning the good ACC games, which they can't even do that right now. They lost to Stanford. I'm concerned about them winning the games at SMU and Clemson and all these other, lower level ACC teams that are still decent, but they have to win those games if they want to stay relevant and stay ranked, and that's a big problem because I don't know if they can do that right now.
Definitely. Was there any other teams that you want to point out
Yeah,
that you found
let's
disappointing?
throw it across state. Let's go to Kentucky. They've kind of righted the ship a little bit. Like, I'm not going to say that Kentucky is out of the water, but it looked bad. They were almost a non-tournament team about a month ago. And then they beat St. John's, which is still not even that good of a win if you're going to ask me. But
Right.
They got blown out by Bama. I don't know how they're going to do against a lot of these other higher level SEC teams. I don't know if they can beat a Vanderbilt. I don't know if they can beat an Arkansas either. Like these are games that they should have been dominating at the start of the season, as you would have thought. And even with Jaden Quaidance now, I'm still worried about this team not making the tournament.
It's something really interesting because it seems as if that some of the top portal classes, I mean, I'm sure all of these teams are in the top five portal classes this past offseason. They've struggled a lot. I mean, St. John's, I think, might have had the number one rated transfer class this offseason. They're obviously unranked now. Kentucky brought in a bunch of high marquee transfers. They are currently not doing good either. You mentioned Louisville too. Louisville was top three in transfer portal classes rankings. They're going to be unranked next week, and it's really interesting to see that in a world where a lot of people feel that you need the transfer portal win, and I think you do to a degree. But I think building teams solely off of transfers isn't really the recipe to win in college basketball. And I think that's become very apparent this year. Michigan, I think, is the one exception to that transfer rule where they've really hit on every transfer that they landed this past offseason. So that's definitely good on them. That those acquisitions have been really good. But yeah, I think Kentucky, I thought maybe they were going to turn the corner after the St. John's game, but as every day goes by, that win doesn't look as good as it did at the time. And even at the time, it wasn't the greatest win either. I guess if you're a Wildcats fan, you're hoping Jaden Quaidance getting more adjusted to the college, to playing college games again, where he missed the start of the season and was up and down at Arizona State last year playing for Bobby Hurley. I think that hopefully he brings a level of toughness and defensive tenacity that'll get the other guys on the roster more bought into doing the little things that lead to winning. But right now it just doesn't look that way. And I don't know, Mark Pope, I don't know if he's going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I also know if he's going to be able to figure it out. There are so many problems with this Kentucky team, which is a shame. I had this team in my Final Four. I was saying before the season started, this team was going to be the deepest roster in the country. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Big Blue Nation. What's going on? This team is
Yeah.
so incapable, and it's beyond the injuries. It's beyond anything else. Otega Owe, the preseason player of the year for the SEC, is not playing even like a first team all SEC player half the time.
Right.
You're not getting movement out of your freshmen as much as you would have thought. Like Malachi Moreno had a great start to the season. Where is he now? Colin Chandler looked great to start the season. He's not doing as consistent as he used to be. I just don't know anything about this team. Like they can win the big games and maybe get a top 5 seed if they're very lucky, but they have to run the table. They have to run the table if they want to do well. And I just don't know what's going to come of it because they could really pick up 10 losses. They could pick up 10 losses more than they're going to pick up like 10 wins at this point. Like I'm so unsure about where this squad goes, and Hope has been under fire for it. Like this is not the thing you want to see it in your sophomore year coaching one of the most important franchises in college basketball. And Big Blue Nation is not friendly to any team that any coach is trying to put them down. Not that Mark Pope would do that, but a sophomore slump is not what you were expecting from a guy like him. And you got to hope that he turns it around sooner rather than later.
Right, but I think now it's time to get on to some teams who have excited us. Teams that have definitely surprised us with the expectations we had, and maybe just didn't even touch on them really at all going into the year. I'll start off first with probably the obvious one. It's Nebraska. They were unranked to start the year. Nebraska ball is so back. They are currently ranked 10th in the AP poll. They do have a potential trap game coming up against Minnesota, but without Kate Tyson's playing, but I think they probably will have enough to win that game. Nonetheless, though, coming off what was a prove-it game against Michigan State, who is another surprise team that's really been a team that's excited me and completely outperformed expectations that I had for them going into the year. But getting back to Nebraska, they won a close game, a one-possession game, and let me just tell you, the way Nebraska plays, they got shot makers. Reek Mast, he's played really well. I think he had 5 threes against Michigan State. He hits a lot of big shots. Berg, he's really just one of the best glue guys in the sport right now. What he can do. Obviously, he's a little bit undersized. He's the coach's son. So call it nepotism if you want. But I mean, he's produced solid numbers this year. He makes the winning plays. The way they defend and just really cutting off the middle driving lanes and really forcing you to take shots contested and off the dribble from along the perimeter behind the three-point line. It's forced a lot of teams to force up a lot of three-point shots. I mentioned to Josh off recording, I believe Nebraska is third in their opponent's 3-point volume across the entire country. But those opponents aren't hitting those threes. I still want to continue to see Nebraska prove it against some of the better teams that look like true national championship contenders, like a Michigan that they have coming up. I mean, Josh pointed out to me that there's a real world where Nebraska's 20-0 walking in the Chrysler Center against Michigan. So that could be something to watch out for, and that could definitely be one of the more important games of the college basketball season, seeing if Nebraska really is legit. But nonetheless, they've really shocked me this year. I mean, the Nebraska ball, it's something it's here, and it looks like it's here to stay.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. It is asking for a lot, if you do ask me, because I feel like there's opportunities for them to be the second best team in the Big Ten right now. They are playing on
Yeah.
a level that nobody ever thought, and thank God they're finally going to do it. Thank God they're going to finally likely win their first game in the NCAA tournament, which is just wild to say that for this entire time, this entire history that March Madness existed, Nebraska just never won a game. It's finally happening at long last, thank God. But how do they fare against Michigan? How do they fare against these trap games? I'm glad they won against Ohio State, but there needs to be more and more and more tests for this team. And I really feel like by the time March Madness occurs, we'll really know what this Nebraska squad is all about. And I'm so excited to see where that goes. But I'm going to talk about the other undefeated team that is on a very similar track. And we just mentioned them earlier today. That's Vanderbilt. They're about to have their big test against Alabama. That's pretty much your Michigan State game. And I think they're in a really, really similar route. You have Mark Byington in his second year. He's looking perfectly the part that he needs to be. The team is already undefeated right now and is looking to continue that streak. And they probably will continue that streak for at least a few more games, if you're going to ask me. And I don't know. I just, there's something so special about what Byington brought in, both from the portal, but also keeping his talent with Tyler Tanner, because I think Tyler Tanner is the real story of this Vanderbilt squad. He's a sophomore. He had an under the radar freshman year, wasn't anything special, and he explodes. He becomes the player that I'm sure Mark Byington saw, but no one else did. And I really wonder how this team can continue to move forward, because is Vanderbilt a national title contender squad? Can they make a Final Four? Like, we don't even know if they can win the SEC right now. We still have this game to decide that, for example. But even then, like, this is still a top 10 team, most likely riding through the rest of the year. There is so much to just love about where this squad can be. And it really makes me wonder what their ceiling is, because this is the biggest wild card right now in Power 5.
I like the point you made about them being the biggest wild card across the Power 5 conferences. I think there's still a lot of unknowns with Vanderbilt. They haven't been challenged really all too much this year, but we're going to begin to see it starting tonight against Alabama. I think it's going to say a lot about where that program can go and where they stand really across the top of the sport. But nonetheless, I think you have to give Mark Byington all the credit in the world. I mean, to really put Vanderbilt basketball on the map this year, where I think it's nice to see coaches go to programs that maybe don't have the most attention in the basketball world and really start to build a brand and build a name at that school. It's nice to see. I'd like to see that happen in the Big East, for example. But again, a lot of credit goes to him. A lot of credit goes to him, like you mentioned, finding Tyler Tanner, sticking with him, having that retention of a guy who makes a sophomore leap. Excuse me, I think you could say the same thing with Tyler Nickel. Tyler Nickel has talked about he feels that this is the most unselfish team he's ever played on in his basketball playing days. And I mean, he's played well this year too. He was one of the big guys that was part of that team that upset so many teams in the SEC last year at home. I mean, Duke Miles legitimately has an argument to be player of the year in the SEC. I don't think he'll win it, but I think the job he does both on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively, just you can't put into words how much he's meant to that program this year. And he's a big reason why I think they could potentially beat Bama tonight. But another team I want to throw out there is Gonzaga. Gonzaga, of course, got blown out by Michigan in the Players Era Festival, but they are currently a top 10 team in the AP poll. They sit at eighth. And this is a team that I really honestly wasn't sure if I felt comfortable ranking in our personal preseason poll that we did for the Court Storm. I think what was a major thing was me and Josh both overlooked the amount of experience that team has. I forget the average age of that starting lineup, but I think it's 22, 23 years old. They have so many guys that have played a lot of college basketball, and they all have size. They're just they're good defensively. They're good offensively. Graham Ike is a stud. Braden Huff is a stud. Mario Saint Supri off the bench is a new dimension of a freshman who has professional experience in your what was it, Spain?
Yeah.
In Spain. So he brings a new dimension for them off the bench, and he, legitimately could be one of the top players in the sport next year if he returns to college basketball for Mark Few. But yeah, I mean, I really did not think that they had any world of an opportunity to be a top 10 team in the country this year, and here they are. I mean, they've looked really good. Granted, they didn't play their best game against Michigan. I feel like you could also just attribute that to an off night. But for them to really play as well as they have in their out of conference scheduling, I'm sure they're going to continue to roll through the WCC. Though they have been challenged in a couple games, which is something to watch out for. I'm shocked, honestly. I think you got to give Mark Few a lot of credit.
Yeah, no, you got to give Gonzaga a lot of credit for in their last year in the WCC playing above their expected average. They're a possible 1 seed right now. Really could run the table with the WCC, beat St. Mary's twice, which is another great St. Mary's team, as
Right.
always. So if you can ask me, a great surprise for them because I originally thought they're going to be unranked this part of the season. We were going to be having talks about, is St. Mary's better than Gonzaga? Like, is this the death knell of the WCC, and this is why they're leaving and all that? And I'm glad it's not necessarily the case, which once again, it's a shame that St. Mary's and Gonzaga are now splitting up in that same way. But
Right.
Gonzaga looks great. They're a national title contender team, depending on who you're talking to. Probably most people would say that at least, but definitely a surprise for us. I think for my last one, I know as the Big East has been the biggest disappointment, but there are two teams in the Big East I want to spotlight that are not that case. That being Villanova and Seton Hall. Villanova is the second best team in the Big East, which let that sink in. They were not a team that was supposed to even be on the bubble walking into preseason. We did not know a lot about what Kevin Willard was going to bring. Akin and Lewis was like a random piece in the puzzle. Duke Brennan, we didn't really know that much about. Like, this squad was not deep. It wasn't anything special. It's still not deep. It's still not that special. But they played well against BYU. They're 3-0 in conference. Like, they have these great games that have just been elevating them to the point where, yeah, they could be ranked. They almost were ranked into going into this week, and they probably will be ranked going into next week's AP poll. They could probably take down a UConn. They can probably take down a St. John's or almost any team in the Big East on a given night. This is a squad that I never thought was going to be this good. And honestly, in the same light, Seton Hall. This team has nothing. Like me and Kanai were talking about this. Their best transfer was Bud Clark, who went to like what, Merrimack?
Merrimack.
He wasn't even like a especially good transfer. But Shaheen Holloway, who I think is second best, maybe third best coach right now, at least in the Big East, is turning dust into diamonds. He's making everything somehow work with the freshman Najee Hines, who had that crazy buzzer beater and one win over Creighton. Like, he's playing levels better than his original like 2 or 3 star rating. Like, he's growing players out of thin air, and it's wonderful. And this is a team that really could be a dark horse in the tournament. This could be a surprise team to knock off a 1 seed if they really go on a run.
Yeah, I love how you're giving shouts to both Villanova and Seton Hall. I think in this year especially, you need the teams that are normally towards the bottom of the conference to be at the top of the conference with how the top of the conference that we expected to be really good. They just haven't been. And Villanova, I got to give a lot of credit to Kevin Willard for, in a way, kind of figuring out pretty quickly. The first game of the season against BYU, they didn't look the greatest, but what they've got in Bryce Lindsey, Caden Lewis has been good, as well as guys like you mentioned, Duke Brennan, Matt Hodge played really well the other night too. They have guys, they're not super deep, but they have guys that can play really well. And I think it's important. Kevin Willard's a Big East guy. He's got Nova back on the right track, and Villanova should be one of the top teams in the Big East every year with the history that program has. And Seton Hall, I mean, Shaheen Holloway, he's running away with the Big East Coach of the Year trophy. Like, I would give it to him right now. I don't think there's another coach that's going to overtake him in that race. But to get just an entire roster of guys that to just buy in, and they play so tough defensively, they play with energy. It's not always the easiest playing at the Rock with them when their crowds haven't been as good as they used to be in the Powell and Mamu days. But to have just really a bought-in team that's really all in on being tough as nails and defending at a high level and playing with energy. They're going to knock off a lot of teams at home this year in the Big East, I believe. And I'm worried as a UConn fan of UConn taking that trip to Newark next week to play Seton Hall at the Prudential Center.
Yeah. You got anybody else or?
I guess I'll throw a really quick shout to Iowa State. I honestly overlooked the retention. I understood they were bringing back Taman Lipsey and of course Momchilovich and Josh Jefferson, but I kind of just wrote them off. I didn't expect them to be anything better than middle of the pack this year, and they're undefeated right now. They're the third best team in the country, so that's definitely been a surprise to me. I definitely think that's a team that could win a national championship with how good they've been both defensively, which is normally what you get with the TJ Otzelberger Iowa State team, but just how good they've been offensively this year as well. Seems like Taman Lipsey's finally took that step forward. Momchilovich has shot the cover off the ball to start the year. Josh Jefferson looks like he can be an All-American as well. So I think, Iowa State deserves a lot of flowers there.
Yeah, no, I very much agree with you. And I saw their game in person at Purdue, and that's the game that really changed my opinion of Iowa State. I didn't really think they were anything too special. They just had honestly, a light schedule going into the year that really helped them get good. But now I'm worried. This is the team that can compete with really any team. And in the Big 12, as loaded as it is right now, Taman Lipsey, Jefferson, and Momchilovich is the biggest triple threat in the country. I'm horribly worried about any team going up to face them, especially in Hilton Arena. That is a house of horrors now. And expect this team to make a deep, deep run in March if everything works out the way they want.
Most definitely. But I think that's going to take care of everything we had for you guys today on the Court Storm College Hoops Talk podcast. As always, if you stuck around till the end, please engage with the content we put out as much as you can. And until the next episode, we'll see you all next time.